How we doing? Are you rejoicing? Doesn't sound like it. Are you rejoicing? Let me tell you why it's a good thing to rejoice. Kids are going back to school soon. You get to get rid of your little hedgehogs for part of the day. I want to talk about, aren't they so cute, hedgehogs? Don't you just want to hold them and love them and squeeze them, and especially the way we kind of characterize them? I want to talk about the dark side of hedgehogs. And I know you're wondering what verse is that from. Bear with me. In the book by Carol Alice, Through the Looking Glass, there's an interesting interaction where Alice is going to play croquet with the Queen of Hearts. Now, in playing croquet, a crane was her mallet, as you can see in the picture, the bird, the crane. And the ball was actually a hedgehog. It says groundhog there, but it's actually a hedgehog. And so what happens is the hedgehog rolls up to a ball. She takes the crane, at least in theory, hits the hedgehog, and it heads toward the wicket. Now, you see, just like pool, croquet is a game of basically physics and geography on the ground. But if you understand vectors, if you understand the proper grasp of the mallet, if you apply the right amount of mallet to the ball, it will go in the direction that you send it. And that's how you play the game. Pool's the same way. Pool, if you understand how to hit the cue ball and how to send it to the ball that you're trying to pocket, you can control all of that. And if you know the speed of the felt that you're playing on, if you know the rebound of the bumpers on the side, you can control the game if you have the skill level. The problem with Alice was she was working with a crane that had a mind of its own, and she was working with a hedgehog that as soon as she would hit it, it would unroll and head off in the direction it wanted to go. So she's trying to get it to head toward a wicket. It didn't want to go there. So it would roll once or twice, unroll. She's sending it in this vector, and then it just takes off in that one. You can imagine her frustration because her hedgehog would not cooperate with what she was trying to do. It was frustrating because she could not control the ball, quote unquote, which was a hedgehog. And the difference between a hedgehog and a ball is that a hedgehog has a mind of its own, as does a crane. If the crane decides to go limp, you're not going to play the game. If the hedgehog decides he doesn't want to go in the direction that you send him, he doesn't want to go in the direction that you initiated him in, he will change his vector, and you will not achieve your goal through that hedgehog. God gives us precious children. Unfortunately, each is equipped with a mind of their own. We can send them in whatever direction that we want, but they can intervene because they have a mind and a will. Free will is foundational to a relationship with God. As we've talked about before, part of love is free will. The object of love must have a right to choose whether to respond to the love. Brothers and sisters, God has sent all of us on a vector, and that's all He will do. He will not force a vector change if we decide on a vector change. What I mean by a vector change, if He sends us in this direction and we decide like a hedgehog we want to go into this direction, He will not force us back into the direction He was sending us. He sends us on our way, and then He watches what we do on that way. Just like little hedgehogs, we have minds of our own, don't we? Just like little hedgehogs, God can send us on a perfect vector, and we can depart from that vector. Like little hedgehogs, we can roll a couple of times in the direction that God sends us, then we can unroll and go in whatever direction that we choose. Do you understand how frustrating that's got to be to God? But do you understand He will not take away that free will? He will merely invite us, you hear that? Invite us back to His original plan. He doesn't force us. He doesn't take away our free will. He invites. Guys, listen to me. This is important because inviting seems very passive. Controlling seems very powerful. Controlling is force. Inviting is just that. It's passively requesting while still honoring the freedom of choice. So free will is foundational to a love relationship with God. Free will of others is problematic to us, isn't it? The free will of your spouse gets in your way sometimes, doesn't it? The free will of your children frustrates you in your goals. And what's important is we've got to understand the difference between our goals and their goals. Got to understand the difference between Alice's goal and the goal of that hedgehog. And the goal of the hedgehog sometimes is, I'm going to change the direction she sent me because I want to go over here. Sometimes in the hedgehog says, I'm going to go in this direction, not because I want to go over here particularly, but because she wants me to go in this direction, and I'm going to exercise my free will, and I'll show her. So I'm going to choose to go in any direction other than the one that she sent because I want to show her I can choose for myself. Alice cannot make the ball go through the wicket. Now in croquet, you can, but not with a hedgehog. God doesn't control people. You see, we're often quite willing to try to control others and the choices of others to achieve our goals for them, especially when we think we know better. We are willing to take away free will. We are willing to control people to get them to do what we want them to do. God doesn't do that. Love doesn't do that. Now, let me show you a prodigal hedgehog. And he said, a certain man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. And he divided his wealth between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country. And there he squandered his estate with loose living. Now when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be in need. So the father has started this son on a vector. And that vector is, you take care of business. You stay here where everything's provided for you. I will take care of you, and I will give you, when my time comes, when it's time for me to die, I will give you a guaranteed life income. But the little hedgehog says, no, I want that money now. So he goes to Dad. He unrolls after Dad sends him on a vector. He unrolls and says, no, I don't want to be here. I'm going to go over there. And I want you to give me that part that falls to me. I want my inheritance right now. And he believes he has a right to it, even though this is a gift to his father. So this prodigal father has a hedgehog on his hands. Actually, he's got 2 hedgehogs. And so the one says, I know you want me to do this. I know you want me to do that. But I want, therefore, you need to subsidize me in doing what I want to do with money that I haven't earned, but that you have earned, but you've promised to me. Since you promised to me, I want you to subsidize my lifestyle in a distant country. So verse 15, he went and attached himself to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. Now, we can spend a lot of time with this, and we don't have a lot of time to spend, especially given the major point. to leave his father and to go to a distant country. He's a Jew. His father is Jewish. And he's going to Gentiles, which is evident in the fact that he ends up feeding swine. And that is the most, represents evil, represents squalor, represents sin to the Jews. His life has become so bad. Now understand, in trying to keep from going in the direction that his father sent, he's gone off a cliff. But he's exercised his free will. He was longing to fill his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving anything to him. You ever slop the hogs? I used to go with my grandma, and she would slop the hogs. And guys, everything we put in the garbage disposal, she put in that bucket. Grease and everything else. And we were going to slop the hogs. I never, ever thought to myself, you know, with some Texas toast, this could be good. It was yuck. He was hungry enough to want to eat what the hogs were eating. Guys, the hogs only eat what the humans will no longer eat. And he's so hungry, and his little hedgehog plan didn't work out for him. But when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I'm dying here with hunger? I will get up, go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. And he got up and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly bring out the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf, kill it, let us eat and be merry. Look at this. For this son of mine was dead. He's come to life again. He was lost. He's been found. And he began to be merry. Now his older son, his other hedgehog, was in the field. When he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He summoned one of the servants and inquired why these things were so. And he said to him, your brother has come and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has received him back safe and sound. But he became angry and was not willing to go in. And his father came out and began entreating him. His father had a plan for him. Come rejoice because your brother's back. Not going to do it. His dad lined up the putter and putted the ball, and the ball said, not going that way. I'm going this way. I'm going to have myself a little pity party. Now, his brother had already fallen off the cliff. What's he doing? He's fallen off a different cliff. And the dad said, my son was dead. Why? Because he chose a different vector. I'm the dad. I know the best way to do this. He's got 2 hedgehogs. Do you have a hedgehog? Do you have hedgehogs in your family? That in spite of the best teaching you can give them, they're going to choose their own way. In spite of the vector you sent them on, they're going to choose their own way. In spite of the teaching that you have given them. And here's the thing, you can always go back and doubt your teaching. You can always say to yourself, if I had just, and that's when you're trying to control. Did you teach them? Did you teach them in the way they went? No. Because then they're not being hedgehogs. You taught them in the way, and they left it. They left it. Guys, I understand. This is when parents beat themselves up. But I'm going to tell you something. In this story, the father represents God. God did not beat himself up over his prodigal son. He hurt for the son. He longed for the son. But he understood, I've got a hedgehog, and hedgehogs are going to do what hedgehogs do. I can send him on the vector like Alice sent that ball toward the wicket, and it unrolls, and it heads in the direction that it wants to go. That's not on me. That's on the hedgehog. Do you hear me? Because probably the deepest guilt that parents deal with is about their hedgehogs and the choices those hedgehogs make. Verse 31, and he said to him, my child, you've always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. You were on the right vector, child number 2. You decided to have your pity party. You decided that you were jealous of this guy who went and almost died. In fact, he said he was dead. God's a perfect father, right? This man had 2 sons, and they were both hedgehogs. This man sent both of them in the proper direction, and they took off. Does that make him a bad father? Remember who you're talking about. You're talking about God. Is he a bad father? Because his hedgehogs did not continue in the direction he had sent them, but decided they knew a better way. They knew an easier way. They knew a quicker way. They knew whatever. Is that on the dad? No. He did not change. He did not become less. He did not fail. They did. The prodigal exercised his own will against the teaching of his father. The father, God, did not fail because the son did. Read that one again. The father, God, didn't fail because his son failed. His son failed. And there's an attitude among some people, and guys, I think to a certain extent, maybe every parent at some time or another, that if my child fails in something, I failed. But ultimately, if my child gets out of the way, and by that I mean as long as we walk in the light as he is in the light, as long as we walk in the way, but if my child leaves the way, I did something wrong. No, your child did something wrong. In spite of your teaching. Yeah, but if I had taught more, if I had done this, if I had done that, that's how we talk ourselves into trying to control the outcome. If I had done enough, he wouldn't have left. Hedgehogs have minds of their own. And guys, every one of us is a hedgehog. And God has cried rivers of tears over each one of us. But that's not on him. That's on us. As a coach would say, I can coach you, but I can't play the game for you. You got to get out there and do it. I can teach you, and I can teach you, and I can teach you. And I can be the best coach. But you've got to play the game. We all know hedgehogs. We all have hedgehogs in our families, in our extended families. And in spite of what being was taught right, they headed off in their own direction. In spite of how much love was presented to them. And remember, the Father here is God. We all have hedgehogs. We all have been hedgehogs. Some of you may be being hedgehogs right now in choosing to live your own way in spite of what God has taught you. But God is still perfect and guiltless. He's the perfect parent who raises hedgehogs. And that's not a reflection on him. In fact, it's a reflection on his love that he grants them the right to make their own choices. Because that's what love does. Guys, God loses all of his children. Every one of us is a hedgehog. Because somewhere around the age of accountability, we decide we got a better way to do this. And I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And our parents probably were up at night wringing their hands and praying, Lord, help this child. But they were also feeling, have I failed this child? Not if you taught them what was right. Not if you showed them in the exam. I'm not talking perfect. I'm talking dedicated. Every child becomes a prodigal, And that means at one point we were all dead. That's why we had to be raised into newness of life through baptism, because we were dead. We were dead in sin. And God reached out to prodigal hedgehogs. Very few of them, very few of God's children come back to him. Every one of them's a hedgehog. But very few, like this prodigal son, came back and said, Dad, I've blown it, and I'm not even worthy to be called your child. Make me like one of your hired hands, and I will be okay, because I never realized what I had, never realized what you were telling me was true. I had to do it my own way, and I have suffered horribly for that. But Dad, you know what? That's not on you. That's on me. So if I can just live in your presence, if I can just live out in the bunkhouse with the hired hands, I will be happy, because I now know what you taught me was right. And Dad, I'm sorry I'm a hedgehog. I'm sorry that you sent me in the right direction and I took off in my own direction. So the question remains, from the story of the prodigal son, is God a bad father? If you're going to value a parent by what their children do, then you have to say God failed as a parent. If you're going to determine good parenting as what happens with the children, what you may be measuring is control, not freedom and love. Because when we look to the example of God and his two sons, which represent all of us, he failed to a certain degree with both. But he didn't fail at all. He reaffirmed what they had taught them. You've always been here. You've always had everything. I did not do wrong by you. You're doing wrong by your brother, and you're doing wrong by me. This little hedgehog is on you. And if you have a hedgehog, there's a time when you have to say to yourself, I didn't teach this hedgehog this behavior. This was not modeled. It was never said as okay. This is on them. This is not on me. This is not what I stand for. This is not what I believe. This is not what I taught. This is not what I model. This little hedgehog is on you. Now, there's always a candle in the window, and the door is always open. But I'm letting you be free to choose, little hedgehog. And what that may mean is I don't see you in heaven because you choose the far country. And I hate that, but I defend your right to choose. Because I love you so much that I want you to be where you want to be. Now, I want you to be in the right place, but I will not control you in that. Little hedgehog, you're free to go. I hope you will come back. That's your choice. And whether you do or don't, it's not on me. God had two little hedgehogs, and he failed neither of them. The measure of God's ability as a parent is not determined by how many of his children remain faithful. That is the nature of hedgehog. That's how you evaluate the children as individuals, is what they choose to do with the Father gave them. Because he cannot and he will not control their outcome. Does it break his heart? Absolutely. Does God have hedgehogs to get themselves into terrible messes? Yes. Does God say, this is not what I taught you. This is not how we live here. This is not what we do? Yes, he does. So then, beloved, just as you have always obeyed, not in my presence only, but much more in my absence, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. The only solution to hedgehogs is the God inside them that is working to teach them how to want to follow him. That's the hope that you have. And if you have hedgehogs right now that you have sent in a vector and they've gone in another vector, and you're standing there like the prodigal father, hoping against hope they will come back, knowing that your child is lost, knowing that your child is dead, and at most of the time they don't come back from that situation, but there is hope. Please know this: God is at work on and in your hedgehog. And if he can't bring them home, you never could. If his Holy Spirit indwelling them cannot bring them home, you don't have a chance. But I got good news. It's not on you. It's on them. Alice couldn't make the hedgehog go through the wicket. You can't get your children to heaven. But God can, who's at work in them. You trained them. You taught them. You had them in class. You brought them to activities. You taught them at home. You taught them while you were standing, while you were sitting, while you were walking along the way, while you sat at the meal. And your little hedgehogs went out, and some of them chose to go in a different direction. That's on them. They will be held accountable, not you. If you don't teach them, that you will be held accountable for. Because your little hedgehog doesn't have a chance if he's not sent on a vector. Brothers and sisters, as parents, there's probably nothing that brings guilt more in parents than children. Nothing brings pain like the pain of children. But pain and guilt are not the same thing. Hurt and separation and responsibility for hurt and separation are not the same thing. Let go of the guilt and acknowledge that your hedgehog is a hedgehog, being what hedgehogs are and doing what hedgehogs do. And that's not on you. That's on your hedgehog. And double up your prayers with the God who is at work to will and to work for his pleasure, not yours, his pleasure. Pray that he doubles and triples that influence so that one day you can celebrate that your prodigal hedgehog has come home and you can kill the fatted cat and rejoice. Brothers and sisters, this life is short, and this life has basically one purpose, and that's for us to decide where we're going to spend eternity. And 50, 60, 70, 80 years is a flash in the pan compared to an eternity. The most important choice that we will make is the vector that we send our children on toward God, toward that eternity. But there is no insurance. In this world, God included, there is no insurance that they will choose to stay on the path. That's on them. If you have a desire to return to the path, you have the opportunity. Remember, we're all hedgehogs. Now, are you ready to come back to the direction you're being sent? Because it's the perfect and right direction by a perfect and right Father. If you're really willing and want right now to make that choice, I'm going to change my vector. You have an opportunity to do that this morning. If your vector has never been toward God, you have the opportunity to put Christ on in baptism, be united with him, and be set on the road to eternity in heaven. If we can help you with those choices. But what I'm going to ask you to do, once you have established that your relationship is right with God, I want you to leave any guilt that you have over hedgehogs that are using their own minds. I want you to leave it in this room and go. Because it's not on you. It's on them. Can we help you in any way in your walk? Come as we stand and sing, would you?